Hello, friends, and welcome in. This is Rates and Barrels. It's a Monday Project Prospect, and I'm not DVR. Derek Van Riper is currently trekking across the country, I believe, right now. He is doing the dubious task of 28, 30 hours. What do you think, What do you think that is to Wisconsin? It's got to be 28 plus.
I've done a lot all the way across, which I would, 6 days is more leisurely pace. 5 days is, 12, 13, 14 hours, So I once did it from Miami to San Francisco in 4.5.
Oh my God. Really? That's awful. I have
sucked.
No real traveling in me. My wife was from Wisconsin and she did the drive to Arizona, maybe even to San Diego. And it was, I think, close to 28 hours. So probably spread out between 2 or 3 days. But that is where Derek is. He is currently making that trek out. Did you guys have a goodbye brew or anything like that? Did you guys have a
Yeah, we did.
meetup?
We went to Rosati's Alpine Inn, locally known as Zotz, and they don't have a great beer list, but they always have Pliny the Elder on tap. So, and it's kind of up in the foothills, so you're kind of just sitting in the trees drinking Pliny the Elder. It's not bad.
Oh, that sounds pretty nice. And then you also got to do a little bit of that over in Legoland just the other day as well. Any good beers to speak of?
I did not drink at Legoland this time.
No?
But, no, I know. But did have the ramen. The ramen is really good. Everything is ramen. That was actually pretty good. And saw the Go Extreme Sports Show, which was BMX bikers and like scooter, but not like
Yeah, like the little flippy ones, like
the flippy, like the kind of the razor scooters.
There you go.
And a skateboarder. And at some point, they all got on the half pipe at the same time and were doing backflips and stuff. So that was pretty cool. I didn't know what to expect really going in. And some of it, of course, is cheesy, but the acting that they put around it and stuff. But that's just that's true. It's like for kids, right? It's like I don't know. Maybe it's required for, kids shows like that. But
you and I, DVR was asking this, and we'll get to baseball here in a second, but he was like, why? I don't understand why either, but you and I are just on the same schedule of life right now, because we also, we did the Great Wolf Lodge within the same week. Yeah. I am literally going to LA in 2 days, and I will be at Legoland in 3 days as well, and maybe Universal. So you and I are on that same schedule.
Our kids of similar ages,
Exactly.
I mean, that's the thing about Legoland. It's great for younger kids. It's better than Disneyland for younger kids, I think, because there's a bunch of rides there where there's almost no line, because it's for the kind of 3 to 6 and 7-year-olds, and that's nice to just have a bunch of rides where you can just step in and just do it real quick. And then they have these video rides that are a little bit more for the video gamey, interactive kind of game rides, and those are great for the kind of 7 to 11 and 12 crowd. I think my eldest, we're nearing the end of his wanting to go there so much, but he still gets a Lego at the end of it,
Yeah, he still gets the set. He's like, oh, I get to buy something, right? That's exactly that's how my kid
fun.
is with. A lot going on, obviously, because we are in All-Star Weekend break right now. As we're recording this, we got the Home Run Derby coming up. We've got the All-Star Game. But what is prevalent to this episode that we do the focus on is we have got prospect stuff, because we're going to be talking about the futures game. We're going to be talking about the MLB draft, where the first 2 rounds just finished last night. We're actually, literally, as I'm talking right now, the third round is about to start in the MLB draft. But we're going to be talking about the top 5. We've got some interesting numbers on Paul Skenes, and we've got some interesting comps that Eno has put together for Dylan Cruz, which we're going to talk about here shortly.
Did you see the commish get booed?
Did you see his face too? I saw him get booed. There was he took it in stride, but when the Astros came up, you could tell he was just done. Yeah, he was like super mad. The Mariner fans and the Seattle fans were giving it to him really hard. They did a good job.
It to him in the Astros pick, but he was getting a fair amount of it the whole way through, huh?
Oh, I was doing some TV stuff.
I heard from one source that he was getting booed every time he stepped on the stage.
Every single time he was getting stepped on. I didn't watch every single one of them because I was doing the TV, but I happened to be focused on the Astros one, and they went really hard, and he got frustrated. Yeah, he got like really frustrated. And then Raul Banez, obviously comes out to do the second round, and everyone was ecstatic. So
yeah,
I don't know. It's kind of funny that they did that. So we're going to be talking about the MLB draft.
Hometown picks to Dylan Noble or Meyer Noble.
Noble Meyer.
Noble Meyer, picked by the Marlins high school, tall
Jesuit,
kid.
Same school as Mick Abel high school, the Jesuit high school, and he went there. Yeah, exactly.
That seems like a pitching factory there. And
it's starting to be.
There are some local ones that got some nice love.
Yeah, there was, and also one of the cool things, not to jump into it right off the top, but we got the first pick ever for the extra compensation for rookies starting the year. So Julio Rodriguez last year, came up day one, played the season, won Rookie of the Year. So we got and it was the Mariners. So the Mariners at home city, that was the second pick, and that pick was Johnny Famaggio, I think his name was. I might be saying it wrong now. My brain is mush, but he's the first ever compensation pick for baseball changing their rules, and it happened to happen there. And the Mariners also had back-to-back picks after the first round, so it's pretty cool. Like I said, we'll talk about the Cruz comp. Farmello, yeah, Johnny Farmello.
Westfield High School, Virginia, elite speed, 18-year-old center fielder.
And they had taken Colt Emerson and then Ty Pete. They had 3 picks in the top 30 picks overall.
That's pretty impressive for a team that's kind of, well, they're not there yet, I guess, but they're marching their way towards respectability. I mean, this is a team that should be good soon, and they get 4 picks on the first day. While they're, it's kind of maybe they're doing something here that's kind of like a 2 timeline approach where they're able to get some nice picks and also improve the major league squad.
I think also it's something that teams are going to have a really hard look at, because this is it. It happened last year. This is what it visually looked like. And that was a pretty good pick, because it also was a little bit higher because the Mets, they messed up and I think their pick moved down and blah, blah, blah. But it's having the 30th pick in the draft.
The Astros are still being penalized, right?
Yeah, I think the Astros, they had the 28th pick. Yeah, I'm a little confused on the whole process of it, but either way, it was 30.
It is annoying when you look at the list of picks and you're like, okay, so there's 40 picks in the first round.
Well,
how does that work?
A and B
comps,
and C, and then this was the PPI. Yeah, it's super weird. But the Diamondbacks will get one next year because of Corbin Carroll. And, because it's they win Rookie of the Year and then they're in the top 3 race of Cy Young or MVP. So on the AL side,
they wouldn't get 2 picks if he won the Roy and was okay.
No, that's just qualification, and you can only have 1 eligible player to do it. So technically, multiple teams could do it. In just throwing out some weird hypothetical, if and I don't see why this would happen, but if Corby Carroll were to finish top 3 in NL MVP voting, and then Ellie De La Cruz were to win. Well, I guess Ellie didn't break camp, but if he had broke camp, that would be a scenario where 2 would get there. My whole point is Corbin Carroll will be one of these.
It would be weird for Corbin Carroll to be top 3 in the MVP and not win Roy.
Yeah, exactly. Hunter Brown has got the potential to do it in the AL if he were to win the Rookie of the Year award, because he broke camp. And what that I think does is it really puts a little bit more pressure on teams to give this a bigger, harder consideration for next season. And the transition to this is we've had a couple promotions. The most important, I just wanted to mention before we talk about the futures game, was Jackson Holliday was just promoted to AA. And that was actually a big focus on the futures game when they had multiple interviews with Jackson Holliday, and they kept asking him, oh, you're getting excited to at some point get to AA. And he was just kind of shaking his head. And because he probably knew literally the next day they were calling him up. But it's because I had this conversation. This is a high school kid 1 year ago was just drafted. He was the highlight of the draft, number 1 overall last year. He's touching double A on July 9th. That's the promotion when they're actually back, which means outside shot you can get to triple A this year. But more importantly, this team probably gives a very, very hard look at him in spring, not only because of the extra compensation and them putting themselves in with Gunnar, but he might be ready and he might be able to contribute, if not right out of camp next year, early on in the season. And maybe those extra pick considerations, now that we have like a very tangible view of what it looks like, might push teams like the Orioles, the Diamondbacks, or any other team that really needs to be highly competitive to start pushing these players, even into, I argue, the top 2 picks we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Teams like Washington and the Nationals, or Washington and the Pirates, might want to consider these very major league ready close guys to come up next year, because these are the teams that need these extra picks. They need to be able to take advantage of it. So
especially when I was talking about the kind of the Mariners 2 timeline, right? It's like, for the D-backs, how great would it be to have one of their best seasons in recent years, have Corbin Carroll, and then also in the year after they win 92 games or something and pick in the back end of the first round, be like, aha, but we get 2 picks in the back end of the first round,
yeah.
That's a great thing. I mean, when I look at the draft day grades from Eric Longenhagen over at Fangraphs, what really sticks out to me is when you only have 1 pick on the first day, and like the Yankees just got George Lombard. Like, that's good, they got a pick, but it's kind of nice for other teams like the Phillies got Adam Miller, third baseman. That's great. But
Right.
it's way nicer to be like, hey, we came away with 2 or 3 kids on the first day.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be a big deal. The other name that you had on the rundown as being promoted to Double A is Blaze Jordan. Blaze Jordan came on my radar recently because he is a guy that had interesting feel for hit. His strikeout rates are low, but his swinging strike rates are high. But his power was not hitting his potential. I mean, he had 55-60 raw power and 35-55 game power on Fangraphs, and he had ISOs around 140 and 150 last year. This year, he's gone on a weighted bat program with the Red Sox, and there is some correlation between bat speed and a negative correlation between bat speed and whiffs. There is a correlation between bat speed and just missing more. But he managed to pull the feat where he lowered his swing strike rate, lowered his strikeout rate, and improved his slugging percentage, all with the use of weighted bats and coaching and just some general progression, which is obvious for a 20-year-old. But now his upside looks really really fascinating to me, where you could get a guy that, despite some higher swinging strike rates, might be able to hit for a high average while hitting for power. I don't know that he's going to steal a ton, which is funny because his name is Blaze. But he might steal enough to keep people honest. And I wonder what this sort of pressure this puts on Tristan Casas. This year, Blaze Jordan has split time almost equally between first and third. Third seems like it's capably handled right now in Boston. So I don't know where Blaze Jordan's going to end up or what it means for Tristan Casas, but I did want to throw in a plug there for weighted bats. I do think they work. There's been peer-reviewed research on the subject, and here's an example of it.
Was it organizational? Why? Because you mentioned this some like month or so back about David Hamilton was another one of those guys. He had a big resurgence in the minors on that weighted bat program. Was it like all minor leaguers kind of across the board?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's prescriptive, like everybody has to pick up a weighted bat and do it. It's more that they identified certain people. It is pervasive, and it is part of the new approach to minor league hitting in Boston. They hired Jason Ochart away from the Phillies, and they also hired no, don't do this. Soteropoulos. Sorry, John. They also had John Soteropoulos away from Driveline. He was working with Lars Nootbaar. Anyway, the two of them are big proponents of bat speed. And so, if you have great bat speed, you don't have to do the weighted bat program. You know what I mean? It's more for guys that I think they identify guys who have good hit tool, good sense of the strike zone, and could have better bat speed.
And Blaze also, just throwing out, was like a kind of one of the very first of the viral sensation. Like Max Clark, someone who just got drafted, is a very social media based guy. Blaze was that too. At 14 years old, he's the guy who was hitting like videos of 500-foot homers. Like the power has always been his game. But as far as like how he's developed, you actually see it very, like, it's weird. A-ball in 2021, 21% strikeout rate, 194 ISO. Then he came back and repeated in 2022. His strikeout rate went down to 16%, but his ISO also dropped. Then he goes to high A that same year, 25% strikeout rate, ISO tanks. And now he's back up with the lowest strikeout percentage of his career and the highest ISO outside of his complex league run. So you can see development, not linear. It is up and down, and you can see how that's working out and the progress that's going on. But I thought those were two really important promotions that are happening. And this is the space. There might be a few more guys, All-Star break, organizations looking, because they're also going to be bringing in this whole new talent pool, which, you know what, let's flip this. Let's go, since we've talked so much about the MLB draft, let's actually flip and jump into that. And then we'll go into the futures game, since that's a little bit behind us. And the draft was fascinating in that the best players actually went. There was so much subterfuge about, like, it might be a high school guy and the Pirates are trying to save money to pay guys later. And it ended up just not being the case. The top five were maybe a little bit of different order of some of the players. You ended up having Paul Skenes go number 1 overall, best pitcher since Steven Strasburg, to the Pirates. Dylan Cruz, who I have from a fantasy perspective is my number 1, goes to Washington. Stud 5-tool high school outfielder Max Clark goes to Detroit. Wyatt Langford just falls to the Texas Rangers, right in their lap. I don't think they expected it. Big, huge college bat goes 4. And then Walker Jenkins, high schooler, goes to Minnesota. So let's start with Paul Skenes, Mr. Sarris, because he has got some fascinating stuff. Lance Brozdowski did a great video breakdown this weekend, which he was able to give us some of that just crucial. It's gold in the prospect world or the evaluation world of just like back end analytics that you can't get. Because there was a lot of conversation about the dead fastball. And he was able to show us that there's essentially a 2-inch difference between the vertical and horizontal movement in Skenes. So it's kind of like, dead zone. So the movement isn't there, because there's a lot of discussion about the shape of Paul Skenes' fastball being something that people were concerned about. 209 strikeouts, 15 plus K per 9 in the minors this past year, sub-1 whip, ridiculous stuff. In all of the great breakdown, you get, information about what Skenes stuff looks like. He brought up that he had Driveline Stuff Plus numbers, and these were the two most important ones. 132 Stuff Plus on the fastball, according to Driveline, 122 Stuff Plus on the slider. So the very first question I would be, I'd be excited to hear is, what's the difference between Driveline Stuff Plus and your Stuff Plus? And then however you want to maybe approach this with Paul Skenes' big stuff.
I think there's a little bit difference in approach. I mean, for them, Stuff Plus is a training statistic that helps them understand how to improve a pitcher's arsenal. And if you think about that, if it is more for training than it is for sort of analysis and appraisal, then you want it to be faster. You want it to work on different platforms. So like, you want to be able to be like, oh, we don't have Hawkeye in here, so it's fine. Our Stuff Plus runs on TrackMan or Rapsodo or whatever, So it has to be a little bit more fluid between different data and technology. Whereas my Stuff Plus is for the MLB, and I said the MLB. Is for major leagues. And so therefore it's Hawkeye based. That leads to something that can be a little bit better. And mine might be some of the seam shifted wake stuff, because that's Hawkeye really captures that data best, I think, out of the different data, out of the different technologies that are out there. But theirs has some aspects that are better too. Theirs comes online super fast, and they can tell you in a throwing session what your stuff plus is, and they can use that to help you kind of be like, no, let's throw one with a little more vert, or let's throw one with a little more horizontal. See what the stuff plus says. So it's a little bit more about how you use it. But fundamentally, they were grown from the same petri dish, if that makes sense. They have the same kind of machine learning algorithms behind them, in a very similar approach. So their scaling is also different. So I don't know exactly. Their scaling is larger. So I think a 132 stuff plus on Driveline might be something like a 110 stuff plus on mine. We have slightly different scaling.
I'm very glad you said that, because I was about to ask if you could translate it. The interesting stuff that you get in some of the breaks, obviously, if you just watched Paul Skenes, you can see how he attacks the zone. It's a fastball that can hit 102. He's got an interesting lower extension that Lance had kind of likened it to Bruce Dark Gratterall. And then when you kind of watch, you can kind of see it because he just doesn't have like full extension through. But the secondary's popped. As far as swing and miss goes, the numbers that he had: 66% swing and miss on his slider and 56% swing and miss on Paul Skenes' changeup, which I really like. Changeup hits around 88, but the fastball is going to be the big key. It sits inside the zone more. And I'm curious at your take on the shape idea, because I think it was, you have to forgive me, I think it was like 14 vertical, or it might be 12 vertical, 14 horizontal, or it's within two of each other. What do you think ultimately when you hear the inside the zone more, you hear the shape is bad, but it's 102 and commanded? What do you ultimately think that's going to look like? You said 110 stuff plus, maybe outside of the 132 from Driveline, but like, how do you think your analysis is going to break down that fastball when we actually get to start seeing some, major league data from it?
I think one name that comes to mind kind of is Shohei Ohtani, and I only say that because Shohei Ohtani's shape on his fastball is not necessarily ideal. It's not. He does not make his bones uh, throwing the perfect. He's not like a Bryce Miller. You know what I mean? Like it's not the best shape ever, but he throws it hard, and so there's like still a lot to be gained from throwing hard. And so Shohei Ohtani, for example, has a 115 stuff plus on his fastball, on his 4-seam fastball, and a 103 on the sinker. So, that's something that comes to mind. Not necessarily that they have the same shape, but that you can still get really far in this game just on velo, and so that's part of what they're drafting there.
Yeah, where do you
Um,
think velo and shape, like where does velo overpass shape? Is there I've seen some people do breakdowns on like batting average versus. One of the most interesting things I saw Chris Clegg did, which was, you didn't see crazy batting average differences on 98 to 102 velos in the major leagues, but you did see a slugging percentage dip of like 50 points from 98 down to 102. So there's a lot less slugging that's happening. But like, where do you think the velo just overtakes this shape conversation? At what point,
um,
if ever?
No, it's actually a very complicated question that is super important and that teams need to figure out, and that I'm just at the beginning of sort of trying to think about. So I'm not going to give you an easy answer. But for example, Christian Javier right now is really struggling, and he used to throw 93.8 with good vertical rate from a low slot. Now this year he throws 92.6, and there's a story between Chandler Rome and I that breaks down a lot of this. But now he throws 92.6, so he's down a tick, right? From a slightly higher spot, meaning slightly lower vertical, induced vertical break. All those things have put it together, and it's gone from like a 110 stuff plus pitch to a 90 stuff plus pitch in 1 year. And so, if you're working for a team, or if you're just listening to this and trying to think of something you could research, precarious fastballs is something that you could think about. And what the idea is, which fastballs have great shape and would be great with 2 ticks off. That's sort of another way of talking about what you're talking about, right? Like, does Bryce Miller need to throw 96, or will his fastball, because it has such great, vertical break, will it also be good at 94 and 93 and 92? You know what I mean? So there's something that we can take. We can take Stuff Plus as a sort of idea and kind of start to now go into these little sub rivulets and try to figure out, oh, okay. So if I'm trying to project a guy that's like Christian Javier right now, but I know that next year he's probably going to lose velo because everybody kind of loses velo over time, then I'm going to actually project him to be worse because his fastball is precarious. So I do think shape matters, and I think velo matters, and you're just losing velo over your career. So I would rather draft someone that had great shape, and then maybe try to coach up the velo, or I don't know. But in Skenes' case, I think one thing that helps him is, we're not talking about signing him to the Garrett Cole $300 million 10-year deal when he's, whatever. You're saying, do I want him when he throws hard? And for the Pirates, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's what they're thinking about. And yes, you do want him when he throws hard. I'm trying right now to find a comp. What did you say the vertical numbers were? So
Oh
like
man, I want to say it was like
14,
14
12.
16 or 14 12. It was
I think it
somewhere in
has a
there.
lot of side to side, right?
Yeah.
So 14, 16 sounds maybe right.
And a lot of it was added too, by the way. They did a good breakdown on the draft coverage of like he added like 5 miles an hour. He also changed his release point, his extension when he came over to LSU. I mean, there were massive changes that were done within the last 18 months to the player that he is. To not say like what will happen when he gets to the majors if someone tries to mess with it, but he's got. I want to say it's the horizontal was bigger because it's more like a two seam. I think that's what Lance even described it more as a two seam because there's a lot of ride on it. It's just the vertical and horizontal meet.
It's not if it is those two numbers, it's not amazing because Andrew Haney 14-16, Jesus Luzardo 14-14. You know,
Luzardo was used as a very similar extension comp, by the way, when looking at like his his actual full extension from the mound. Luzardo was one of those guys that popped up as well.
Yikes. Which is not great. I mean, let me get Luzardo's really quickly.
It'll be fascinating to see where you have it because the slider plays up so much because of the fastball in college. The changeup I really liked, but as you said, like Stuff Plus numbers haven't they don't fall in love with changeups. So I'm going to be very curious at like when the data gets going.
I mean, if Jesus Luzardo is a comp, I mean, you also have to think that Luzardo has, in some essence, I think, a precarious fastball. If you look at Luzardo's starts or you just look at his career, he's been so much better when he throws harder. And I don't think he has ideal shape, but right now he has a 103 Stuff Plus on the fastball, 98 on the sinker, 110 on the slider. I think that Skenes' breaking ball is better than Luzardo's. Luzardo's is a bit slurvy. But if you kind of look at where his fastball velocity right now, Luzardo's at 96.9. His worst season was the year he got traded. He was 95.8. So there's a little bit of precariousness maybe to Luzardo's fastball, but Luzardo's a pretty good outcome, right? I mean, we've now got 200 straight innings of a 3.3 ERA and a K9 over 11. And I think that Skenes has some things that are better than Luzardo's. If you think about the breaking ball and the changeup, they might be better than Luzardo's. So,
Yeah.
That's a good place to begin with. Also, 1-1 pitchers. It's not terrible. I mean, we got Cole and Strasburg as 1-1 pitchers recently, and then we had Mize, and there was one more that was meh.
I mean, I always think back to Mick Abel, Mick Abel near the top, but yeah, I mean, there's been a couple that have worked out. It's going to be fascinating because where he's going to be able to live off if his fastball does get hit a little bit in the majors, how up will this, or even in the upper minors, how will the slider and changeup work in the minor leagues? So Paul Skenes, did you have anything else on Paul Skenes? I didn't want to move us on if you had some, if you were still comping.
No, I've got, let me see here. Every number one overall draft pick in history. Let's see here. Casey Mize was one, and then Brady Aiken, Mark Appel,
Yeah, Martin. Yeah,
But Garrett Cole was a good one. Steven Strasburg was a good one. So, and David Price, that's a good one. That counts.
and
Luke
as big of stuff as
Hogovar,
anybody he's got. So
Luke
this is
Hogovar,
probably
not good.
which one?
Luke Hogovar. So that's
Yeah.
it's about 50-50.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you're going to bet on a guy that throws at 102 and has 50 plus swing and miss rates on his
Right.
secondaries in the
The
minor
only
and
other
has made big
problem,
changes.
little thing to mention was just there's some usage, some heavy usage.
Yeah.
Talking about
120 plus every single
120
time he goes
pitches,
out.
still throwing 100. That's fairly stressful. So
100%. Number 2, Dylan Cruz. Dylan Cruz, one of my absolute favorites in here. We've talked a lot about him. Some interesting college data, only a 14% chase rate. He had a max EV of 112.8, which is pretty solid, but he had an incredible, and some people are very dismissive of it, and it's fine, but average EV, I think, is a fun thing to look at. And he had a 95.7, which was the highest of any of the college guys that I had. So that just shows consistent hard hit
pretty
stuff.
nutty.
Yeah, and we talked about it a couple weeks back where, he's hitting 107 opposite field, lowish strikeout rates, high walk rates, makes tons of contact. You went to work on player comps before we started this. So I think this is the guy of guy. I think this is the new face of the organization. You lose Soto, you bring in a guy like Dylan Cruz to be the guy. And I think there's a huge, huge floor with a pretty dang solid upside. I don't know where the power is ultimately going to go and if he runs a little bit more, but talk to us about what comp machine you ran through for Dylan Cruz.
Well, we had a surprisingly disappointing zone contact rate. I had, I think 84.5 and you had like 83.8.
Yeah.
So, I took every, major league qualified hitter that had a zone contact between 83 and 86%. And that ended up being about 30 hitters. And then I took those 30 hitters and I then sorted them by chase rate because we both had plus chase rates. I think you said 15%. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
14.
like the best in baseball have 15%. That's
It was
like
14
Joey Votto.
actually. It was actually 14
Oh,
at
there you
LSU is
go.
what I had.
Even
Yeah,
better.
even crazier.
I don't have any 14s in this group, but I then by sorting by O-swing, I got the guys who don't have the very best zone contact, but do have a very good eye. And I also put pull rate in there, and I should have put quality of contact in, but then you start really whittling it down to like, one guy as a comp. The way that I have this here, the right-handed comps are Brian Reynolds, Ian Happ, and Pete Alonso. And I actually think this describes fairly well 3 different avenues for him to go. If he kind of focuses on the power and works on maybe pulling the ball a little bit more, that'll be the Pete Alonso outcome, where he's got the biggest pull rate of the 3, but he has opposite field power and he's a total masher. And if that's the outcome for Cruz is Pete Alonso in the outfield, thumbs up. If he ends up on the outer end of his strikeout rate, like if it's Ian Happ is 25% strikeout rate, but a 17% walk rate, that sounds very Cruzian, right? That could be a total outcome for Cruz where he's a high walk rate, medium to high-ish strikeout rate, power speed in the outfield, maybe a slightly better Ian Happ. I don't want people to think that like, oh, Ian Happ is not great and he's saying bad things about Dylan Cruz. I don't think that's what I'm saying. It's like you can be the first pick in the draft and be a successful major leaguer and still be Ian Happ, and that'd be a great outcome for your team, But the third one is Brian Reynolds, and that one I think is if he focuses more on the contact. And spraying the ball around and has the better strikeout rate for that kind of zone contact rate. So I think that's in between the 3 of these, you've got some pretty interesting comps, some pretty exciting players, I think. And he could step right in And if he did something like that, Ian Happ but stayed healthy, or Brian Reynolds with slightly more power, like all those outcomes sound pretty good to me.
Yeah, Brian Reynolds is the one, even before I'd even heard any comps or ran anything, was kind of standing out to me. Similar max EVs, at least what we had with Cruz, it was like 112.8. This year, 112.6 for Brian Reynolds.
There you go.
Crazy high average EVs, like I said, for Cruz. 95 isn't going to be the major league one, but Brian Reynolds, 91.9 this year, which is an above average one. Barrel rate, pretty decent at, 12.9. He has a little bit higher of a launch angle than Cruz, at least in college this past year. Cruz had around a 9, but under 20% K rate, almost double-digit walk rate. I just think there's very similar. I think Cruz's upside goes beyond. It's a bigger, more impactful Brian Reynolds. And when you think about that, those start to become like top 2-round fantasy players. It's like I don't want to say Mookie Betts, but it's starting to get in that general area. If Cruz taps into 30 plus power and steals.
Yeah, if he's like a 30-20 guy with a 300 batting average.
Yeah, because that's
a young Bryce Harper in a way.
And I think some people, for obvious reasons, will put some of those comps on there. But he had 422 this past year with a 561 OBP and an almost 700 slug. Almost
that's where I get lost on college stats. Honestly, they're all so good. I mean, did you see the first round picks yesterday? I was watching, and they all had ridiculous numbers. There was guys with 470 averages and like 570 averages. Like, what? That doesn't even make sense to me. So
it's tough when you see like a guy that's at Maryland
Jesuit
or something.
High school.
Yeah, exactly. And they're hitting like 450. Well, high school numbers are absurd because they're putting out like Max Clark, who went 3, hit like 600 in high school this past year. Like,
I've been the guy keeping score in Little League, and I know that's Little League and high school not the exact same thing, but I know that there's a guy like me, like a dad in the stands trying to chart these high school games on the Game Changer app. I bet you they use Game Changer too.
There was something when Max Prep, I think, had Max Clark, who went 3 overall to the Tigers. We can just do quick stuff on these other guys. They had his career high school stats at like 560 with 88 stolen bases and 13 career strikeouts.
I mean, Max, it's not even that far-fetched to think that Max Clark's dad might be the one keeping totally.
He's like,
that's a hit.
This ump's an idiot. That's not a strikeout.
Exactly.
Max Clark, 5-tool player, big run, good hit.
There was a little bit of subterfuge that like maybe people thought that Wyatt Langford should have gone over for him, or
Yeah, that was a bit. Max Clark was in conversation. The rumor was he had conversations with the Pirates to go number 1 overall. So this 1-2 real quick. Max Clark, like I said, 5-tool, very analytical kid, hardest trainer, weightlifting. He's got huge quads, can run like the wind, can hit the ball really well. Actually, really good plate presence on being able to adjust in hitting across himself to push it opposite field, or just get more loopier to try to pull the ball. Very, very smart kid, just as the high school guy, versus Wyatt Langford, who pretty much rated 60 plus on the hit and power. Big, thicker guy, can run. Some project him
was
to
up
be
against better
SEC talent.
Yeah.
I mean, playing up against
at the highest level in college.
Yeah, so that's a big,
but also
difference
big age difference. Where if you think these guys are somewhat similar, you might want the guy who's 4 years younger.
Well, and they're physically very different because Wyatt Langford is he's a big, bulkier guy. I think he's like 6'1" though, but just bulkier physically, a little bit shorter
see him
swing.
Being like maybe first base or corner outfield. Like he's not gonna be a center fielder or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think they would probably try him there, but he's got the feel of like a right fielder. But it's probably 35 plus power with homer power with good batting average and the ability to steal anywhere from 10 to 20 stolen bases, where Max Clark, I don't know if the power is quite there, but he does look like a guy that could steal 30 or 40 bases, hit 20 to 25, and hit for average. So both of those guys are very interesting in fantasy, both really high-end picks. And then the last one, and any takes you have on these guys, was Walker Jenkins, who is physically different than all these guys because he's 6'3", 6'4", 220 pounds plus, got a beautiful swing, big power. He's just a young, projectable guy who I guess had some hamate injury this past year, so missed a lot of circuit baseball time. So those are three very different prospects. They all have power potential, but if you want the 5-tool, it's probably Clark. you want the safe bet with big power, it's Langford. And if you want to dream, it's Walker Jenkins. And that's how the top 5 on the draft came out. I didn't know if you have any Clark, Langford, or Jenkins thoughts.
No, I just high school is a crazy thing for me. I think you have to rely a lot more on the eye test because we just don't know what the fields are like. Like I did a thing on Cuban guys coming over, and sometimes they play their games on the nice field, and sometimes they play their games on the one that's by the hospital. And like the one that's by the hospital has rocks on the infield, and I've definitely seen a big difference in fields around, even in Palo Alto where the fields are pretty nice. I just think that the defense, the quality of defensive opposition, the quality of pitching opposition, like I almost think that the numbers are useless. Have to come with very heavy regression and just sort of mostly doing this on eye tests, which makes me uncomfortable because I don't think the eye test is my best way to appraise players. But I don't think that's true for everybody. So you really have to rely on your scouts, I think, with high schoolers, and maybe that's a little different with high school pitchers because at least you can find some shape data and some. At least you have velo and maybe some shape data, and you can do some stuff plus type analysis. But with hitters, I feel like you're just looking at the swing and saying that looks nice.
I think that's also why a lot of MLB was really trying to push this combine, because at the combine they were able to run these high school guys out on the screen when pitchers were going. You would see vertical, horizontal, you'd see velo, you would see all the data you want up on the screen there. And same with hitters when they were going EVs. But that's also why, by the way, plenty of players did not take part in, like Max Clark did not take part in this, where he could have, I don't know if it had anything to do with anything, but there were players that chose not to hit, just be there, do interviews and stuff like that. But I think to your point, there's plenty of people that are uncomfortable without having some of that data, but that's why it's
and the track record on high school arms is probably one of the worst in the draft.
Well, that's also why I
got to were like, I'm not taking a high school arm in the first anymore.
Well, and the Marlins just didn't care. I definitely want to talk about the futures.
They took 2 high school arms in the first.
Right? 2 the best. They took the best lefty and the best righty. I think Noble Meyer could be special. I really do. He is 6'5", power fastball, power slider, super smart kid. I love him. I think
nice on him.
I think he could be the best in the class. It's not Paul Skenes of all these guys. 100%. That was one of my favorite. The Diamondbacks getting Tommy Troy and Lou James Grover, who Grover is just I think he's an analytic. I think he's a guy we're going to be talking about in the future. Sub 10% K rate in college this year.
Troy was really interesting because we got to see him a fair amount of him near the end of the season.
Oh yeah, he's in your neck
out here at Stanford, and he was outperformed by all the other players on his team in the regional and the super regional and in Omaha. Not in terms of approach at the plate, I don't think. I think he has a really, really solid approach at the plate, and you could see his physicality, and I think he's going to be a good hitter. But in terms of just I think the kind of small sample stuff that doesn't matter as much. Like he just didn't manage to get a homer or a hit while we were watching. And so I kept telling my son, like, yes, that guy's really good. He's going to go in the first round. And we kept waiting for him to do something. And like, he got a couple walks.
That's the worst feeling. I have that a lot when you go to complex. Like I'll be focused on some guy who's been in the Dominican Summer League and he's got these crazy stats. You're like, oh my God, okay, let's go. You sit there and they're like 2 grounders, a fly out and a strikeout. And you're like, what the, that's what you got to see a whole lot.
Is he actually any worse than I thought? Or is this just like one of those weeks where I think he was just taking a lot of walks, I think he has a very strong approach to the plate where he's not going to give in.
13% K rate, 11% walk rate, hit 400, had a 700 slug, 114.3 max EV. Tommy Troy, 92.5%. I will say that there was
something in, was it the Longenhagen saying that Pac-12 hitters haven't worked out?
I mean, Andrew Vaughn's been pretty decent. That's a Pac-12 hitter, but I'd have to like sit and think through all the guys. That's just the first one. Adley Rutschman's a pretty good Pac-12 hitter.
That's right. Just throwing that out. That's a pretty good one. Yeah.
Those are 2 that came to the top of my mind, but those, but it might be like a longer.
The recent history of Pac-12 hitters in pro ball is not good, and the Cardinals are familiar with that. Ryan
They took
Holday,
Chase Davis.
and they took Chase Davis. Maybe Long and Hang is saying the recent history, as in the very recent history. I mean, I think that Vaughn and Rutschman are pretty recent though. So
That's like 2019.
maybe
So
we're looking at the two that succeeded, and there's a
yeah,
lot below that haven't.
there's
So.
there's a ton, and Chase Davis is one of those guys that I really liked as well. It's a fascinating draft. We'll probably continuously break it down. These guys will sign, they'll get to camps. The top 5 is what you guys really care about, but there are some fascinating stories and some really good values of players. Matt Shaw.
Is there anyone that you would take in fantasy that like different from where he was slotted? I think I would take those all of the hitters over Paul Skenes. Honestly, I would just move all those 4 hitters above Paul Skenes. And I think I would just have, I think I'd have the older ones higher just because in fantasy, we can't wait forever.
So that's funny you said that. I have Skenes 3. I'm taking Langford and Cruz over. The 2 high school guys, I think Skenes is going to produce quick. But if you're talking about guys that really differ, I have 2 opposite end ones. Chase Davis is the guy that we just talked about. I have him at like 6 or 7 on my list, and he went 21 to the Cardinals. So I've got him very, very high. Beautiful swing. Everyone comped it to Carlos Gonzalez. Big hard hit numbers. And then the other end of it is Jacob Wilson, who went 6. I have down into the 20s because he has absolutely no power. Huge contact percentages in the 90s on 92 plus EV, or 92 velocity above overall contact, but his average EV was like 83. On what I saw, 102 max EV on a short sample size.
And he got picked by the A's
at 6. So it's like,
I don't think the A's are necessarily going to put him on a weighted bat program and get the most out of him.
If they do, it would be great because of the contact, but he's a guy that went high that I dropped.
But Nick Allen's never heard of weighted bats. I've made sure of that. I asked.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did he do the shake his head like, I don't know what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. And Nick Allen seems like, does that sound a little bit like Jacob Wilson? You know? Yeah. Great contact rates, great defense.
Maybe Vegas will know what weighted bats are, and Oakland just doesn't. Just pointing out there might be reasons behind it. So yeah, Chase Davis would be the guy that's much higher than it was, and Jacob Wilson would go lower. Hey, let's talk about the futures game here for a minute. Though I will tell you, it wasn't like super exciting. Like
a lot of pitching. I mean, no hitting.
There really wasn't much. I mean, literally on this list, as far as hitting, Nasim Nunez got the MVP off of 1 hit where he got a couple RBIs. He was fun, but I had like, Lawler went 0 for 2 with 2 strikeouts. Churio went 0 for 4 with 2 strikeouts. Just some of the big offensive guys. It was about the pitching, and hat tip to DVR and I for talking about it last week. I said on here, Jacob Misiorowski was going to be the guy that everyone's going to ooh and ah about from the futures game, and sure enough, that's exactly what happened. 18 pitches, 14 for strikes, was hitting 102. And there's this interesting anecdotal thing, and then I want you to go through the Stuff Plus numbers, where someone had said, I think it was StatCast, said he threw 4 fastballs, 5 curves, 7 sinkers, and 2 cutters, and he disagreed. And he's like, no, it was fastball, curveball, slider, changeup. So it's just it was a funny anecdotal like difference from what StatCast says to what the player says, because they essentially put, a cutter and a sinker, and he's like, nope, my cutter was a slider, my fastballs were not sinkers, and then I don't even think, and he said he had a changeup in there which wasn't registered, but he looked insane, ridiculous, hitting the top of the zone. He was the talk of the town. Talk to me about what you saw to Jacob Misiorowski with the Brewers.
Yeah, it looked pretty fascinating. And I did see some conversation about whether or not his landing is funky and if he's if his mechanics are super clean, but just in terms of what I can see, which is movement and velo, I was in the tank for him. I mean, 206 Stuff Plus on the 4-seam, and this isn't Stuff Plus doesn't normally start with a 2. There is nobody regularly throwing 2s, and I'm not saying he's going to come next year and or be throwing 200s regularly. The one thing that happens in the futures game is all the starters are converted to relievers, right?
Yeah.
So, this all comes down off of a peak, but it is still nice to see, how does he against his peers, even in this situation where they are throwing for 1 inning, and he was absolutely the best in the game by Stuff Plus. And
have you real quick, have you ever
131 Stuff Plus, and we had it. Yes, it was a cutter, but best Stuff Plus in the game, best fastball Stuff Plus. And if there was no sinker, it was 167. If that was the changeup, that's good. Like just lots of great stuff. Just good vertical movement and good velo.
Have you ever seen a 200 stuff plus from a reliever or anybody? Like, how many times have you seen a 200 stuff plus in any scenario?
Actually, in the futures game before, well, I think there was a 200 before.
Oh, really?
I'm
Okay.
trying to think of who it was. Maybe it was Bobby Miller in the futures game before.
That makes sense. I mean,
Yeah,
big, huge fastball. So,
but
was there did any worry come out of it, like talking about the delivery or the funkiness? Is there any non-starter worry, or did you just take these numbers and go, man, start getting your Jacob Misiorowski, stash him away, and see how he develops over the next year or two?
yeah, I'm not as worried about that. I mean, I think on the very extremes it can be worrisome. I think of Matt Brash's head snap.
Oh, I don't think I noticed if he was. I know what you're talking about with Brash. I don't think I noticed Misiorowski.
I don't think Misiorowski has that. But if everyone's in consensus that it's a problem and I can see it, I get it more. But this one is just a conversation that some people are having about the way he lands. And I feel like that can get cleaned up. I mean, Adam Ottavino, sometimes gets too crossbody, and he like he just takes some spray paint and puts a little circle on the mound when he's training, and just is like, I need to land in that circle. I think there's certain training methods that can help you with your landing style. I don't think that's necessarily something that's innate. So I'm not so worried about that.
I think also when you see like 6'5", 6'6" plus pitchers that have movement, like a lot of movement in their body, it also looks a lot more uncomfortable because this is like I think he's like 6'6", Misiorowski. So when there's a lot of motion in there, I think it just throws people off. That's
Sometimes it
something that's going to
means
be a worry.
it takes a little bit longer to come to fruition. I mean, there are examples in the major leagues of tall, especially lefties that have had taken a while to kind of put it all together, and some that never did. I think of Randy Johnson's the guy who made it work, but Newcomb,
Sean Newcomb.
yeah, was a
Okay.
guy where it didn't, all the different pieces of the delivery didn't quite come together.
Let's hope he's not Sean Newcomb. You got some interesting stuff plus numbers. I thought he had a pretty good performance out of Mick Abel, who I believe started the game, 2 strikeouts in an inning, and I think he
Yeah, you was like
popped.
talking crap on Mick Abel earlier.
Was I?
Yeah?
Who?
Are you saying first round pick and you kind of rolled your eyes?
No, Mick Abel.
Uh, uh,
No.
yeah.
Mick Abel's fun. I like Mick Abel. Out of Jesuit.
The model really loved him. 129 stuff plus on the curve, 121 on the fastball, 120 on the change. It was like one of the few changeups the model liked in that game, and 114 on the slider. So even if you take the changeup out, because I think changeups in 2-3 pitch samples, I'm not going to report those too excitedly. But some of these numbers, like they're put in fastballs and breaking balls. I'm not saying that like 8 is enough, but 8 has signal in it. It's definitely telling you something.
And the numbers haven't quite been there for the season on Abel, but I think it was really good to see him get the start and those numbers pop. Again, it was a smaller outing, like you said, but all 110 pluses with 3 of the 4 being 120 pluses, I think is a very good sign
And
against this competition.
and some traditional numbers that do speak to his excellence in the minors in terms of swing strikes and strikeout rate. A career strikeout rate in the minors north of 27%. So this is a good pitcher. I know that there's questions on his command, and I think that'll largely be what he needs to figure out,
Well, one thing
more than anything else.
you did something cool here, and this guy's name does not show up on it, but I want to get this list. Just wanted to point out, I have been a huge fan, and this is something I said to watch out for, of Carson Wisenhunt in his changeup, because I think it is the best changeup in minor leagues right now. He ended up throwing 10 pitches, 9 were for strikes, and he showed off that changeup, which was absurd. I want to say they actually interviewed Jackson Holliday about it, and Holliday's like, I knew it was coming, but I just couldn't do anything about it. Like, he's like, it was a disgusting pitch. He's like, I knew he was going to throw the changeup, but I just swung through it.
It's
And
also like, that kind of changeup is, I think, one of my favorite pitches to watch. I think it's beautiful because to
yeah,
me, it doesn't make any sense to make the ball move that way.
yeah, it floats. It
Yeah.
floats in and just gets under. But it didn't make this list because you put together the 10 best single
And the
pitch
bottom
types.
of the list is all changeups.
Yeah, I didn't even notice that. You're right about that. But he didn't make the list. So why don't you go through the 10 best single pitch
the 10
types.
best single pitches in the Futures game were Jacob Misiorowski's fastball, Spencer Schwellenbach's curveball, Jacob Misiorowski's fastball again. That's the sinker.
Yeah.
Clayton Beater's slider, Luis Guerrero's cutter, Sem Robert's slider, Owen White's slider, Jacob Misiorowski's curveball. Now you know why he was the top guy overall. Joey Cantillo's slider and Mick Abel's curveball. So obviously this model likes breaking balls, but I think having a really good slider is huge for your outcomes because at the very least you can be a reliever. I think, having a great slider, even in today's league, where I had the piece last week on Friday about how hitters are hitting the sliders better than they have in the past, it's still one of the best pitch types in baseball. And so being able to command it and throw it for action as well. I don't think that I'm the high man on Joey Cantillo or anything, but it does speak well to his possible outcomes. And I took away from this. Misiorowski's the real deal. Cantillo might have something going on, and Mick Abel is better than I thought.
Misiorowski, 3 of the top 10 single best pitches. The only guy to show up on this list twice, which was pretty crazy. What do you got going on? Do you have what articles are in line? We were just talking before we got on the episode here today. What's releasing this week? What's in your world?
Yeah, I'm going to work on a piece about the park factor in San Diego. It has changed from kind of the low 20s to kind of the hardest place in baseball to hit in the last couple of years, according to certain park factors. So I'm taking a look into that this week and just about to publish on the blog. If you are a betting type, and if you're listening to this, you might be, I did my handicapping for the home run derby. So I don't know, it's not up yet, but it'll be up soon. The two things that I look at are barrel rates, which everyone who's listening to this knows, but then also something called a blast rate, which is how often do they hit the ball 105 plus in between 28 and 32 degrees. Those are the biggest home runs in baseball. Those are the biggest home runs in the home run derby. And the winner of the home run derby has been top 4 in the field in blast rate every single time.
So I haven't seen it yet. I did a similar thing. I was trying to take some analytical approach. I went and looked at it's funny, the top barrel percentages from this home run derby. I wanted 15% plus. Mm-hmm. I wanted 50% hard hit rate. And then I found a guy that had a 5 homer expected home run addition in Seattle from where he currently hits.
Whoa.
And I picked Adolis Garcia.
That's my dark horse. I wasn't gonna say it because the piece is gonna go up in a second. But it's just a blog post. Just a blog post. It's all right.
Yeah, so that was my guy.
Adolis Garcia is my dark horse. He's top 4 in blast rate, and the barrel rate thing is if you have a bigger than 5% differential off of your competitor, you win 85% of the time.
Ooh, that's very good.
And so he should win his first round, which is Randy Arozarena.
Yep.
And then he's also. Oh wait, no, he doesn't have the 5% differential on Randy Arozarena. But he shows up in barrel rate and he shows up in blast rate. He was my dark horse.
Yeah, and he had this it was 27 projected homers when I looked at it a couple days ago in Seattle, which was 5 more than he currently had. It was like the 3rd most homers he would have if he hit all his homers in one park was Seattle, which was so odd. So I thought that was a cool little extra thing. Go check that out. You can go to theathletic.com/rates and barrels. If you're not signed up, you can go get locked in for only a couple bucks. You can check out that article. Everything else that is going on, make sure you do so. Send good vibes out to DVR, who is trekking the country, and we will have him back soon. And I think we got a couple more episodes coming up this week, not with me, but with Al Melchior and Eno. Eno, thank you so much for hanging. Thank all of you guys for hanging out with us, and we will talk to you next time right here on Rates and Barrels.
Thanks for listening.